The emergency beacon lit up every communication device across 3,000 star systems in the span of a single heartbeat. The Galactic Council Chamber, a massive crystalline structure floating in neutral space between galaxies, hummed with an energy it had not experienced in millennia. Representatives from the oldest civilizations in known space materialized through various means of transportation. Some arrived via quantum tunneling, others through biological wormholes, and a few simply phased into existence from higher dimensions. Ambassador Quelix of the Vryn Ascendancy stood at the center of the chamber, his translucent form flickering with distress signals that his species used to communicate extreme anxiety. Around him gathered the other council members, the Helixians with their crystalline bodies that refracted light into impossible colors, the Moth Collective whose psychic presence felt like whispers against the mind, and 24 other species that had guided galactic civilization for longer than most stars had existed. The holographic display activated above them, showing a wound in the fabric of space itself. The rift stretched across several light years near the Andromeda border, pulsing with sickly purple and black energy that seemed to absorb all light that touched it. Through the tear in reality, something ancient stirred. The sensors picked up massive signatures, entities so large they registered as small moons, moving with purpose and hunger. Quelix spoke first, his voice translated into every language simultaneously by the chamber's ancient systems. He explained what their long-range probes had discovered. The rift was growing, expanding at an accelerating rate. Worse, the things emerging from it were identified through historical archives as devourers, creatures that had nearly ended all life in the galaxy 5 million years ago. Back then, it had taken the combined might of 100 civilizations and technologies now lost to time to seal them away in a pocket dimension. Now they were returning. The council erupted into controlled panic. The Helixian representative's crystalline form darkened with fear. The Moth Collective's psychic presence became chaotic, broadcasting images of extinction and void. Even the usually calm temporal observers, beings who existed across multiple time streams simultaneously, showed signs of distress. Their probability engines had run every possible scenario. The results were uniformly catastrophic. 6 months until the Devourers consumed enough matter and energy to become unstoppable. 9 months until galactic civilization ceased to exist. For 3 hours, the council debated. Ancient defense protocols were reviewed and found inadequate. The old weapons that had worked millions of years ago were either destroyed or their principles forgotten. The mathematics suggested they would need resources from 10,000 worlds working in perfect harmony for decades to even attempt a solution. They did not have decades. They barely had months. It was the youngest member of the council, a representative from the Kepler Union, who made the suggestion that changed everything. Why not contact every species, even the newest ones? Perhaps fresh perspectives could see solutions the ancient minds had missed. The elder species initially dismissed this idea. What could newcomers possibly offer that billions of years of combined wisdom could not? But desperation breeds innovation, and so the council agreed. Messages would be sent to every spacefaring civilization, including the humans from the Sol system. The humans had only joined the galactic community 70 years ago, and were still considered primitives by most standards. Their technology was crude, their ships barely functional by galactic standards, and their understanding of dimensional physics was rudimentary at best. But the message would be sent anyway, if only to say that every option had been exhausted. The transmission reached Earth on what humans called a Tuesday morning. At the Terran Defense Fleet headquarters in Geneva, Captain Jake Morrison was halfway through his second cup of coffee when the holographic communication system activated without warning. This was unusual enough that Jake set down his tablet where he had been reading reports about a minor pirate incident near the Mars orbital stations. The hologram that formed above his desk was clearly alien, its form shifting and uncertain as it struggled to maintain cohesion in Earth's atmosphere. Ambassador Quelix had volunteered to make the calls personally, feeling that the weight of the situation required a council member rather than an automated system. His voice, translated through standard galactic communication protocols, carried an edge of genuine fear that transcended species barriers. Quelix explained the situation with as much detail as he thought the human could comprehend. He spoke of the rift, the devourers, the imminent destruction of thousands of worlds. He showed images from the probes displaying the massive entities that defied easy description. They existed partially outside normal space, their true forms too complex for three-dimensional eyes to fully perceive. He explained how ancient they were, how powerful, how utterly unstoppable they had proven throughout history. Jake listened patiently, occasionally taking sips of his coffee. When Quelix finished his explanation and waited for the expected panic or at least some sign of appropriate fear, Jake simply nodded. He asked a single question in a tone one might use to discuss weekend plans. So the council needed this rift closed and these devourer things dealt with? Quelix felt his form flicker with confusion. Had the human not understood? He tried again, emphasizing the scale of destruction, the certainty of death, the end of civilization itself. Jake nodded again, glanced at his watch, and said he would have someone look into it after lunch. The fleet had a schedule to maintain, and Tuesday was usually reserved for training exercises and equipment maintenance. Quelix found himself unable to process this response. After lunch? Training exercises? Did this human not understand that trillions of lives hung in the balance? Before Quelix could attempt a third explanation, Jake was already pulling up communication channels on his desk display. He thanked Quelix for bringing this to Earth's attention and assured him that appropriate personnel would be assigned to handle the situation. Then, with what Quelix would later describe as the most casual dismissal of an apocalypse he had ever witnessed, Jake closed the communication channel. Quelix remained floating in his ship above Earth, staring at the now empty communication link. He had delivered dire warnings to countless civilizations over his long life, but never had he encountered such complete and utter nonchalance. Perhaps the humans simply did not understand. Their translation software might have failed to convey the urgency. Yes, that must be it. He made a note to follow up with them in a few days to ensure they comprehended the situation. Back in Geneva, Jake forwarded the recording of the conversation to Admiral Kate Hendricks, with a brief message attached. New dimensional problem bigger than the last one. Kate might want to check her schedule. He then called down to the engineering division to ask if the new prototype ships were ready for field testing. The engineering chief confirmed they were. Jake thanked him and returned to his coffee and his reports about the Mars pirates. 20 minutes later, Admiral Kate Hendricks was reviewing the recording while standing in the command center of the fleet's main training facility. Around her, junior officers were running simulations of combat scenarios against hypothetical alien threats. The simulations involved everything from conventional space warfare to dealing with enemies that could manipulate gravity or phase through solid matter. It was a standard Tuesday morning drill. Kate watched the holographic recording of Quelix's warning twice, paying particular attention to the images of the rift and the devourers. She pulled up historical files from Earth's own archives, comparing what she saw to previous incidents. The similarities to the dimensional parasite incident from 15 years ago were notable, though this situation appeared larger in scale. She made some quick calculations on her tablet, factored in travel time and resource allocation, then nodded to herself. She called Jake back, asking if engineering had really finished the new ships. Jake confirmed. Kate said she would assemble a task force and requested that Jake contact their specialist in dimensional physics. Jake agreed and mentioned he would also reach out to the Special Operations Division. Kate thanked him and ended the call, then turned to address her command staff. They had a situation that required attention, she explained. Standard protocols would apply. The staff acknowledged and began preparations without any visible signs of concern. Across the city, in a suburban neighborhood where children played in parks and people went about their daily routines, Dr. Lisa Grant was teaching her 7-year-old daughter Amy how to ride a bicycle without training wheels. The little girl was determined but nervous, wobbling down the sidewalk while Lisa jogged alongside, offering encouragement. Lisa's phone rang just as Amy successfully made it 20 feet without falling. Lisa cheered for her daughter while answering the call. Jake's voice came through explaining the situation in broad terms. Dimensional rift, ancient entities, Galactic Council in panic. Lisa listened while steadying Amy's bicycle for another attempt. She asked a few technical questions about the rift's dimensional signature and the energy readings Quelix had provided. From Jake's description, this sounded like a Class 7 rift, definitely manageable with the right E. The Galactic Council expected months of preparation and vast armadas stretching across star systems. What they received instead was a message from Earth stating that a task force would arrive at the rift location within 1 week. Ambassador Quelix read the message 3 times, convinced his translation systems were malfunctioning. 1 week was impossible. Even the fastest ships in the galaxy needed 2 weeks to reach the rift from Sol system, and that was without accounting for the time needed to gather resources, plan strategies, and coordinate with other species. Yet exactly 6 days and 14 hours after the initial contact, 12 human ships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the designated coordinates. The vessels were smaller than Quelix expected, each roughly the size of a Vryn cruiser, which was considered a light escort ship by galactic standards. They moved in tight formation, their hulls a dark gray that seemed to absorb sensor scans. The lead ship identified itself as the TDS Horizon, under the command of Admiral Kate Hendricks. Quelix had transported himself to a Council observation vessel, positioned at a safe distance from the rift. He immediately requested permission to board the human flagship, which was granted without hesitation. The teleportation brought him directly to the Horizon's bridge, where he found himself surrounded by humans going about their duties with what he could only describe as disturbing casualness. Crew members walked past carrying tablets and coffee cups, discussing technical specifications and duty rosters as if they were preparing for a training exercise rather than confronting an existential threat. Admiral Kate Hendricks stood near the central command console, reviewing a holographic display of the rift. She was a tall woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical style, wearing a simple uniform that bore minimal decoration despite her rank. When Quelix materialized on her bridge, she glanced up, offered a polite greeting, and asked if he wanted anything to drink. Quelix found himself unable to respond to such mundane hospitality in the face of galactic annihilation. Kate seemed to take his silence as a negative response and returned her attention to the display. She asked Quelix if the Council had additional data about the Devourer's movement patterns or the rift's expansion rate. Quelix, still struggling to understand the lack of panic, provided access to all Council records. Kate thanked him and transferred the data to her crew, who began analysis immediately. Quelix decided he needed to make the humans understand the gravity of their situation. He requested permission to show Kate historical records of previous Devourer encounters. Kate agreed and pulled up a secondary display. For the next 20 minutes, Quelix showed footage from 5 million years ago, when the ancient civilizations had faced these entities. The images were horrifying even by galactic standards. Entire planets consumed in minutes, stars drained of energy, fleets of thousands of ships simply ceasing to exist as the Devourers passed through them. Kate watched the footage while eating a sandwich she had retrieved from somewhere off-screen. She occasionally paused the playback to point out tactical errors made by the ancient commanders. She noted that they had clustered their forces too tightly, making them vulnerable to area attacks. She observed that their retreat patterns were predictable and easily exploited. She mentioned that their weapons seemed designed for conventional warfare and showed no adaptation to the dimensional nature of their enemies. Quelix felt something close to horror at her clinical analysis. These were not tactical exercises, but records of civilizations dying. Kate seemed to notice his distress and apologized for being insensitive. She explained that humans had learned to analyze threats objectively regardless of emotional content, as fear tended to cloud judgment when clear thinking was most needed. She assured Quelix that she understood the stakes, but panic would not help them succeed. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Lisa Grant, who entered the bridge carrying 3 equipment cases and looking slightly disheveled from the journey. She greeted Kate enthusiastically and asked if they were near the rift yet. Kate confirmed they were and introduced Lisa to Quelix. Lisa's eyes lit up with scientific curiosity as she examined Quelix's energy-based form, asking several questions about Vryn biology before Kate gently redirected her attention to the mission. Lisa immediately pulled up the rift data on her personal tablet, her fingers flying across the screen as she ran calculations. She muttered to herself about harmonic frequencies and dimensional membrane stress points, occasionally making excited sounds when she found something interesting. Within 15 minutes, she announced that the rift was definitely a Class 7, caused by excessive pressure from a pocket dimension that had been sealed improperly. The solution would be to equalize the pressure and reinforce the dimensional barrier, though they would need to deal with whatever came through first. Quelix asked how long such a process would take. Lisa considered this while chewing on a pen cap, then estimated about 4 to 6 hours once they cleared the area of hostiles. Quellix's form flickered with disbelief. The ancient civilizations had needed decades to seal the devourers away. Lisa shrugged and explained that dimensional physics had advanced considerably in the past few million years. Plus, humans had dealt with similar rifts before, so they knew what worked. Commander Ryan Torres arrived on the bridge next, leading a squad of soldiers in armor that incorporated technology Quellix did not recognize. Ryan was a compact man with an easy smile that seemed at odds with the weapons his team carried. He reported that his special operations teams were ready for deployment and asked Kate if they had a timeline yet. Kate said they would engage within the hour, pending final scans of the area. Ryan nodded and his team moved to the deployment bay. As they left, Quellix overheard them discussing something about whether this mission would be easier or harder than extracting Ambassador Cole from the Event Horizon incident. One soldier bet it would be easier since they could see the enemies this time. Another laughed and said at least they would not have to deal with time dilation paradoxes. Quellix had no context for understanding this conversation and was afraid to ask. Kate invited Quellix to remain on the bridge during the operation so he could observe human tactics firsthand. She explained that the Horizon and its sister ships were equipped with specialized systems designed specifically for dealing with extra-dimensional threats. Over the past 70 years, humanity had encountered 17 extinction-level events, many involving entities or phenomena that existed outside normal spacetime. Each incident had taught them valuable lessons, which had been incorporated into their military doctrine and technology. Quellix asked what kinds of extinction events Earth had faced. Kate pulled up a list on her display while directing her crew through pre-battle preparations. She scrolled through entries that made Quellix's energy form destabilize with shock. Rogue artificial intelligence that had gained control of the global network. Dimensional parasites that fed on conscious thought. Reality warping entities from collapsed timelines. Sentient dark matter that had tried to compress Earth into a singularity. Time paradoxes caused by experimental faster-than-light drives. The list continued for pages. Each entry included casualty figures, response times, and resolution methods. Some had been resolved in days, others in months, but all shared a common pattern. Humanity had faced the threat, adapted quickly, and found solutions that the Council's probability engines would have rated as impossible. Kate explained that Earth's position in the galaxy seemed to attract unusual phenomena, possibly due to some quirk of local space-time geometry. Her tone suggested this was a minor inconvenience rather than a curse. The ship's sensors detected movement near the rift. Kate immediately switched to tactical mode, her casual demeanor replaced by focused professionalism. She ordered all ships to battle formation and activated what she called Protocol Nightmare. Quellix watched as the human vessels transformed before his sensors. Sections of their hulls retracted to reveal weapons platforms. Energy signatures spiked as systems he had not known existed came online. The ship's movements became more precise, more predatory. Lisa set up her equipment on the bridge, creating a small workspace where she could monitor the rift while the military handled the combat. She cheerfully explained to Quellix that her dimensional resonators needed precise placement, which would be easier once they cleared the immediate area of hostiles. She showed him her calculations, pointing out where she would need to position devices around the rift's perimeter. The math was far beyond anything in Council databases, incorporating principles that would take Quellix years to fully comprehend. The rift pulsed with dark energy, and something began to emerge. Quellix felt the familiar terror of his ancestors' memories. The devourers were coming through. He waited for the humans to show fear, to hesitate, to realize the magnitude of what they faced. Instead, Kate calmly ordered weapons hot and all ships to standby positions. Ryan's voice came over the communication system from the deployment bay, confirming his teams were ready for boarding actions if needed. A young officer named Pete Sullivan approached Kate with a nervous expression. He admitted this was his first encounter with reality-warping entities and asked if she had any advice. Kate smiled. The devourer that emerged from the rift was larger than anything Quellix had seen in his 300 years of life. Its form defied easy description, existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions. To three-dimensional eyes, it appeared as a writhing mass of darkness with appendages that flickered in and out of reality. Energy readings from the creature spiked across every spectrum, including several that should not exist in normal space. The entity's very presence caused the fabric of space-time to ripple and distort. Quelix braced himself for the inevitable chaos. Based on historical records, ships would begin experiencing system failures within moments of contact. Crew members would suffer temporal dissonance, experiencing their past and future simultaneously. Some would simply cease to exist as the Devourer erased them from the timeline. This was how it had always happened. This was why these creatures were considered unstoppable. The human fleet did not scatter or retreat. Instead, Kate's voice came calmly over the communication channel, ordering protocol nightmare activation across all vessels. Quelix watched his sensors in stunned silence as the 12 human ships underwent a transformation. Hull sections that had appeared to be normal armor plating retracted to reveal arrays of equipment that made no sense according to conventional physics. Energy signatures that moments before had been within normal parameters suddenly spiked to levels that should have torn the ships apart. The horizon shuddered slightly as its temporal stabilizers came fully online. Quelix felt the change immediately. The sense of temporal dissonance that had been building since the Devourer's emergence suddenly stopped. It was as if someone had wrapped normal spacetime around the ship in a protective bubble. Kate explained without looking away from her displays that humanity had encountered time-manipulating entities before and had developed countermeasures. The stabilizers essentially locked the ship and its crew into a single timeline, making them immune to temporal attacks. The other ships activated similar systems. Dimensional anchors hummed to life, preventing the Devourers from phasing out of normal space. Reality enforcement fields projected outward, forcing the entities to maintain a single stable form. The humans were not just defending against the Devourer's abilities, but actively negating them. Quelix realized with growing amazement that every weapon system, every defensive measure, had been designed with extra-dimensional threats specifically in mind. The Devourer attempted its first attack, projecting a wave of energy meant to erase matter from existence at a quantum level. The wave hit the horizon's forward shields and dissipated harmlessly. Kate checked her readouts and reported shield strength at 96%. She ordered weapons free and the human ships opened fire. The weapons they used were unlike anything in the Galactic Council's arsenal. Quantum disruptors that could target objects existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Temporal torpedoes that hit their targets in the past, present, and future at the same moment. Reality anchors that forced extra-dimensional entities to fully manifest in normal space, where conventional weapons could damage them. The Devourer recoiled as the human weapons tore into its form. Quelix could scarcely believe what his sensors were showing. The ancient horror was hurt. More than hurt, it was bleeding energy across multiple dimensions, its form destabilizing as the human attack continued. The creature attempted to retreat back into higher dimensions, but the dimensional anchors held it in place. It tried to shift through time to avoid the attacks, but the temporal weapons found it regardless. Kate coordinated the fleet with practiced efficiency, directing fire to maximize damage while maintaining defensive formations. She spoke in calm, measured tones, giving orders that her crews executed without hesitation. There was no panic, no desperation, just professional military precision applied to a problem that happened to be an ancient cosmic horror. When one of the Devourers attempted to release a psychic scream, meant to drive organic minds insane, Kate simply activated the ship's psionic dampeners and the effect vanished. Ryan Torres contacted Kate from the deployment bay, requesting permission to proceed with boarding operations. Kate glanced at her tactical display, confirmed the target Devourer was sufficiently weakened, and gave approval. Quelix felt his energy form flicker with shock. Boarding operations? The humans intended to board one of these entities? The very concept seemed insane. 3 assault shuttles launched from the horizon and 2 sister ships, moving with impossible agility through the battle space. Each shuttle carried a team of special operations soldiers equipped with weapons and armor that incorporated technology. Quelix was certain violated several fundamental laws of physics. The shuttles fired dimensional grappling hooks that latched onto the Devourer's form, creating stable anchor points in its extra-dimensional structure. Then Ryan and his teams jumped. The soldiers crossed the void between shuttles and target using personal propulsion systems, landing on the Devourer's surface with magnetic boots that somehow found purchase on its reality-defying form. Quelix watched through the horizon's sensors as the teams cut their way inside the creature, using plasma torches designed to burn through dimensional membranes. Within moments, they had disappeared into the Devourer's interior. Lisa looked up from her calculations long enough to explain to Quelix that the Devourers were essentially predators that had evolved in higher dimensions and had never developed defenses against threats from within. Their external forms were nearly invulnerable by conventional means, but their internal structures were surprisingly vulnerable if you could reach them. Ryan's teams carried specialized charges designed to collapse localized dimensional pockets, which would cause catastrophic damage to the creature's ability to maintain coherence across multiple dimensions. Inside the Devourer, Ryan and his teams navigated through spaces that should not exist. The creature's interior was a maze of passages that twisted through dimensions, where up and down became meaningless concepts. But the soldiers moved with confidence, following pre-planned routes based on data gathered from previous encounters with similar entities. They planted their charges at key structural points, working quickly but without apparent fear. The Devourer seemed to realize it had been invaded. Its movements became more erratic, more desperate. It thrashed against the human ships, trying to shake loose the soldiers inside it. Kate ordered increased fire to keep the creature distracted while Ryan completed his mission. The human fleet poured concentrated fire into the Devourer, their weapons systematically destroying its ability to manipulate reality in its defense. Ryan's voice came over the communication channel, confirming all charges were planted and his teams were extracting. The soldiers emerged from the various entry points they had cut, sprinting back toward their shuttles. One soldier stumbled as a dimensional ripple passed through the area, but his teammate grabbed him and hauled him along without missing a step. The shuttles picked up their passengers and accelerated away from the Devourer at maximum thrust. Kate counted down from 5. When she reached 0, Ryan triggered the charges. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Devourer's form convulsed as dimensional pockets collapsed throughout its structure. Its coherence across multiple dimensions failed, causing it to solidify completely into normal space where it became vulnerable to conventional damage. The human fleet did not waste the opportunity, concentrating all firepower on the now vulnerable target. The ancient horror died thrashing and screaming across multiple spectrums of energy. Its form broke apart, dissolving into particles that scattered across dimensions. Within 90 seconds of the charges detonating, the Devourer had ceased to exist. Quelix stared at his sensors, unable to process what he had witnessed. An entity that had taken the combined might of 100 civilizations' decades to seal away had been destroyed in less than 10 minutes by a small human task force. But there was no time to marvel at the achievement. 2 more Devourers were emerging from the rift, drawn by the distress signals of their dying companion. These appeared larger than the first, their forms more complex and threatening. Kate assessed the new targets and updated her tactical plan accordingly. She ordered the fleet to split into 2 groups, each focusing on one Devourer. She also asked Lisa for a status update on the rift sealing preparations. Lisa reported that she had completed her analysis and knew exactly where to place her resonators. However, she would need the area cleared of hostiles first, as the equipment was delicate and could not function properly with Devourers disrupting local spacetime. Kate acknowledged and promised to clear the area as quickly as possible. She then contacted Ryan to ask if his teams needed rest before the next engagement. Ryan's response was casual to the point of being almost cheerful. His people were fine, he said. This was actually easier than the time they had to extract Ambassador Cole from the black hole's event horizon, because at least these things moved slowly. His team was already reloading and preparing for another boarding operation if needed. Kate thanked him and returned her attention to the battle. The engagement with the 2 new Devourers followed the same pattern as the first. The human ships negated the creature's reality warping abilities, attacked with weapons specifically designed for extra diamond. Lisa Grant stood in the cargo bay of her shuttle, surrounded by equipment that looked delicate enough to break if someone breathed on it too hard. 3 large containers held what she called quantum resonators, devices that could manipulate the fundamental frequencies of dimensional membranes. Smaller cases contained calibration tools, backup power supplies, and enough sensor equipment to outfit a small research station. She hummed a tune while checking each piece of equipment, occasionally making notes on her tablet. Quelix had insisted on accompanying her to observe the rift sealing process. He floated near the shuttle's bulkhead, his energy form pulsing with a mixture of curiosity and lingering anxiety. Despite witnessing the humans destroy 3 devourers with relative ease, he could not shake the dread that had been drilled into his species' collective memory over millions of years. The rift itself represented a tear in the fabric of reality, and working near it seemed inherently dangerous. Lisa noticed his distress and tried to reassure him. She explained that rifts were actually quite predictable, once you understood the underlying physics. They were essentially tears in space-time caused by pressure differentials between dimensions. The pocket dimension where the devourers had been sealed was trying to equalize its pressure with normal space, which created the rift. The solution was to manually equalize that pressure and then reinforce the dimensional membrane so it would not tear again. Her tone suggested she was discussing something no more complicated than fixing a leaky pipe. The shuttle launched from the horizon with 2 escort fighters flanking it for protection. They approached the rift slowly, giving Lisa time to take detailed readings. She sat cross-legged on the floor of the cargo bay, her tablet balanced on her knees, eyes scanning streams of data that Quelix could barely comprehend. She made excited sounds occasionally, pointing at particular readings and explaining to herself how they confirmed her theories about dimensional stress patterns. The rift itself was massive up close, stretching across space like a wound in reality. Its edges pulsed with unstable energy, colors that should not exist bleeding into the darkness. Looking at it too long made Quelix's sensors report contradictory data, as if the rift existed in multiple states simultaneously. Lisa stared at it with the fascination of a scientist who had found the perfect research subject. She took dozens of measurements from different angles, building a 3-dimensional model of the rift's structure in her computer. After 30 minutes of analysis, Lisa announced she had mapped the rift completely and knew exactly where to place her resonators. She would need to position 12 devices around the rift's perimeter at precise coordinates. The devices would generate a harmonic field that would gradually equalize the pressure differential, while simultaneously reinforcing the dimensional membrane. The whole process would take approximately 4 hours once she started, assuming nothing interfered. The catch, she explained while assembling the first resonator, was that someone would need to go into the rift's event horizon to manually calibrate the devices. The resonators had to be synchronized to within microseconds of each other, and the quantum interference from the rift itself made remote calibration impossible. Someone would need to physically visit each device and fine-tune it by hand. This was dangerous because inside the event horizon, normal space-time rules did not fully apply. A person could experience multiple timelines simultaneously, see possibilities that never were and futures that might never be. Quelix felt his form destabilize with alarm. This was effectively a suicide mission by any reasonable standard. Anyone who entered the rift's event horizon would be exposed to dimensional stresses that could tear apart both body and mind. The Council had lost dozens of volunteers when they attempted similar operations millions of years ago. He started to protest, to insist there must be another way. But Lisa was already speaking into her communicator. She contacted Kate and explained the situation matter-of-factly. Someone needed to go into the event horizon for calibration. It would be dangerous but manageable with proper equipment and training. Kate acknowledged and said she would call for volunteers. Lisa thanked her and returned to assembling her equipment, apparently unconcerned about sending someone into a reality-warping anomaly. 5 minutes later, Ryan Torres contacted Lisa from the horizon. He and his entire special operations team had volunteered for the calibration mission. In fact, Kate had apparently needed to order people not to volunteer because too many crew members had raised their hands. Ryan's voice carried amusement rather than fear, as he explained that his team had dealt with similar situations before and were already preparing the necessary equipment. Quelix could not understand this. Did humans simply not feel fear? Or had they encountered so many lethal situations that they no longer registered danger normally? He asked Lisa directly how she could be so calm about sending people into what amounted to a tear in reality itself. Lisa looked up from her work, genuinely surprised by the question. She explained that yes, it was dangerous, but they had good safety protocols and excellent equipment. Ryan and his people were trained professionals who understood the risks. More importantly, someone had to do it. And Ryan's team was the most qualified. She added almost as an afterthought, that this was actually safer than the time she had accidentally opened a portal to the void in her laboratory basement. That incident had been truly scary because she had not been prepared for it. This time they knew what they were facing and had planned accordingly. Her casual mention of accidentally opening portals to the void made Quelix wonder if humans had any concept of appropriate fear responses. The resonators were deployed over the next hour. Small drones carried each device to its designated position around the rift's perimeter, where they anchored themselves using dimensional clamps. Lisa monitored each deployment carefully, making minor adjustments to account for local variations in space-time geometry. Once all 12 resonators were in place, she activated them in a carefully orchestrated sequence. The devices hummed to life, generating fields that began to interact with the rift's energy signature. Ryan's shuttle departed the horizon carrying his calibration team. The shuttle was heavily modified, equipped with the same temporal stabilizers and dimensional anchors that protected the warships. Inside, Ryan and 5 other soldiers wore specialized suits that could maintain stable local reality fields around their bodies. The suits were bulky and covered with equipment that Quelix did not recognize, but the soldiers moved in them with practiced ease. As the shuttle approached the rift's event horizon, Lisa provided Ryan with constant updates about the resonator's status. She guided him to the first device, explaining what readings she needed him to check and how to adjust the calibration controls. Ryan acknowledged each instruction calmly, his voice steady despite the fact that he was about to enter a space where the normal laws of physics were more like suggestions. The shuttle crossed the event horizon, and reality became fluid. Quelix watched through the horizon's sensors, though the readings became chaotic and unreliable the moment the shuttle entered the rift's interior. He could see fragments of the shuttle existing in multiple positions simultaneously, echoes of possible paths it might take. The temporal distortions made it appear as if the shuttle was moving both forward and backward through time at once. Inside the shuttle, Ryan and his team experienced something beyond normal human perception. They saw timelines branching infinitely in all directions, each one showing a different version of events. In some timelines they succeeded and sealed the rift. In others they failed and the Devourers consumed the galaxy. In still others, events they could not understand unfolded in ways that defied logic. One soldier reported seeing herself as a child, as an old woman, and as something that had never been human all at the same moment. But the training held. The temporal stabilizers in their suits kept their minds anchored to a single timeline, preventing them from losing themselves in the infinite possibilities. Ryan focused on Lisa's voice coming through the communicator, using her instructions as a lifeline to maintain his sense of reality. He reached the first resonator and began the calibration process, his hands moving with steady precision despite the chaos surrounding him. Lisa talked him through each step, her voice cheerful and encouraging. She asked him to describe what he was seeing, using his observations to refine her understanding of the rift's internal structure. Ryan reported seeing fragments of the Devourer's home dimension, a place of strange geometries and impossible physics. He saw echoes of the ancient civilizations that had sealed the rift originally, their final desperate acts playing out in temporal loops. He saw futures that might never come to pass and pasts that never were. The calibration took 15 minutes for each resonator. Ryan and his team moved methodically from one device to the next, working their way around the rift's perimeter. They experienced time dilation that made each minute feel like hours from their perspective, though only minutes passed in normal space. They saw visions of cosmic events beyond human comprehension, witnessed the birth and death of universes, and encountered fragments of entities that existed beyond the Devourers. Through it all, Ryan maintained a running commentary. The rift sealed with a pulse of energy that rippled across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Lisa watched her instruments as the dimensional membrane reinforced itself, the quantum locks engaging one by one. The tear in reality that had threatened to consume the galaxy closed like a wound healing, leaving behind only faint traces of its existence. Her equipment confirmed what she already knew from the readings. The seal was permanent and stable. Nothing short of another 5 million years of dimensional pressure would break it open again. She contacted Kate with the good news. The Admiral acknowledged and asked if Lisa needed the fleet to remain on station for any follow-up work. Lisa checked her data one more time and confirmed everything looked good. The resonators could be retrieved and the area was safe. Kate thanked her and began issuing orders for the fleet to prepare for departure. They had other assignments waiting back in Sol system, and staying longer than necessary would disrupt the schedule. Quelix could hardly believe what he was hearing. The humans were preparing to leave already? The Galactic Council had prepared an elaborate reception to honor whoever managed to save civilization from the Devourers. There would be ceremonies that lasted for days, medals of the highest honor crafted from materials that existed only in council vaults, speeches from the eldest beings in known space. Surely the humans would want to participate in such recognition after accomplishing the impossible. Kate politely declined most of the ceremony when Quelix brought it up. She explained that her crews needed to get home because they had families waiting and other duties to attend to. The fleet had been away from Earth for nearly 2 weeks now, which was pushing the limits of their planned deployment time. She appreciated the Council's gratitude, but really they had just been doing their jobs. Could the Council perhaps send the official thank you documents to Earth's diplomatic office? That would be much simpler for everyone involved. Quelix felt his energy form flicker with something between frustration and disbelief. These humans had just saved trillions of lives across thousands of worlds, and they were treating it like routine paperwork. He insisted that Kate at least make a brief appearance before the Council. The elder species needed to thank humanity properly. Kate considered this and agreed to a short meeting. But she emphasized it needed to be brief, because her crew had already been working double shifts and deserved rest. The Council convened in their grand chamber within hours of receiving word that the rift was sealed. Representatives from every major civilization gathered to witness this historic moment. The Vryn Elders, the Helixian Collective Consciousness, the Moth Collective's strongest psychics, and dozens of other ancient beings all assembled. They prepared speeches about courage, sacrifice, and the debt the galaxy now owed to humanity. Historical records were updated to include this day as one of the most significant in galactic history. Kate arrived via shuttle with Ryan and Lisa accompanying her. She wore her standard duty uniform, which looked plain compared to the elaborate garments and energy displays of the Council members. Ryan had changed into a dress uniform but still carried himself with the casual confidence of someone who had faced down cosmic horrors before lunch. Lisa brought her tablet and was reviewing the data from the rift seal, occasionally making notes about things she wanted to investigate further in her lab back home. The Council chamber fell silent as the 3 humans entered. Quelix performed the formal introductions, his voice carrying the weight of ceremony as he presented Admiral Kate Hendricks of the Terran Defense Fleet, Commander Ryan Torres of Special Operations, and Dr. Lisa Grant of Dimensional Physics. The Council members observed the humans with a mixture of awe, curiosity, and residual confusion about how these relative newcomers had accomplished what ancient civilizations could not. The eldest Vryn spoke first. His words translated across all languages. He began a speech about the dark times when the Devourers last threatened the galaxy, and how millions had perished before the Ancient Ones managed to seal them away. He spoke of the fear that had gripped the Council when they realized the seals were breaking, and the certainty of doom that had settled over all who knew the truth. Then he thanked humanity for their courage, their sacrifice, and their incredible achievement in facing down enemies that had destroyed countless civilizations. Kate listened respectfully, and when the Vryn finished, she provided a concise response. She thanked the Council for their appreciation and explained that humanity was glad they could help. The Devourers had been a significant threat, but nothing humanity had not encountered variations of before. She recommended that the Council update their threat assessment protocols because the assumptions they were working with seemed based on outdated military doctrine. Modern dimensional physics and properly designed weapon systems made entities like the Devourers much more manageable than historical records. Suggested, she offered to share humanity's dimensional defense technology with the Council. Earth's engineering corps could help install similar systems on Council worlds for a reasonable fee. The technology was not particularly complex by human standards, and could be adapted to work with most existing defensive infrastructures. She also suggested that the Council might want to review their emergency response procedures because the 2-week delay between identifying the threat and assembling a response force seemed inefficient. The Council members sat in stunned silence. Kate was offering constructive criticism about galactic crisis management procedures moments after saving civilization. The Helixian representative, whose crystalline form had returned to its normal brilliant colors after days of fear-darkened opacity, asked how humanity remained so calm when facing existential threats. What was their secret? How did they master fear so completely? Kate considered the question seriously before answering. She explained that Earth's position in the galaxy seemed to attract unusual phenomena at an alarming rate. Humanity had faced 17 extinction-level events in the past 70 years alone. Rogue artificial intelligence, dimensional parasites, reality-warping entities, time paradoxes, sentient dark matter, and various other things that by all rights should have ended human civilization. Each time, humanity had to adapt quickly, learn from the experience, and build better defenses for the next crisis. She continued that humans were not fearless. Fear was a useful survival instinct that kept people alert and motivated, but panic was counterproductive, and despair was a luxury nobody could afford when lives were at stake. So humanity had developed what she called operational pessimism, with tactical flexibility. Assume everything will go wrong. Plan for the worst possible scenarios and then improvise when something even worse happens. It was not heroism, just practiced crisis management applied at scale. Ryan added that it also helped to remember that everything could be killed or stopped eventually. The Devourers seemed terrifying until you understood they were just predators from higher dimensions. Predators had weaknesses. Find the weaknesses, exploit them, and the impossible becomes merely difficult. His team had faced things that existed outside normal reality before, and the key was always the same. Stay focused on the objective, trust your training and your team, and keep working the problem until you found a solution. Lisa mentioned that curiosity was important too. The rift had been absolutely fascinating from a scientific perspective. She had learned more about dimensional mechanics in the past week than she had in 3 years of laboratory research. The Devourers themselves were incredible examples of extra-dimensional biology. She had taken extensive readings and was already planning several research papers. The data would advance human understanding of quantum dimensional theory by decades. From a certain perspective, the crisis had been an amazing opportunity. The council members exchanged what passed for concerned glances among their various species. The humans were treating galactic extinction events as learning experiences and professional development opportunities. One of the Moth Collective representatives projected a psychic question, asking if humanity ever encountered something they considered truly dangerous. Kate thought about this and admitted that the time paradox incident had been genuinely concerning because it threatened to erase Earth from ever having existed. That would have been problematic, but they had resolved it eventually by creating a stable causality loop, so it worked out fine. The ceremony continued for another hour with various council members offering formal thanks and asking questions about human capabilities and philosophy. Kate answered each query politely but kept glancing at her communicator, clearly aware of the time. When the formal proceedings finally concluded, she thanked the council again and said her fleet really did need to depart soon. Supply schedules waited for no one on Earth. Traffic control got cranky when ships returned. Outside their designated time windows, the council agreed to send official commendations and documents to Earth's government. They also expressed interest in the defensive technology Kate had offered to share. Several representatives asked if they could arrange meetings with human engineers to discuss implementation. Kate said she would pass along the request to the appropriate departments and they would be in touch. She treated the salvation of galactic civilization as a stand,